your dashboard is lying to you, not because the data is wrong, but because it shows too much. I spent 2 weeks inside a GTM agency, good team, good clients, really solid tech stack. But half the work was really just chasing down metrics that didn't really matter. They had dashboards tracking everything, reply rates, bounce rates, positive reply rates, anything you can imagine. Broken down by last 24 hours, last 7 days, last 30 days, last 60 days, last 90 days. It was all like visible on that main dashboard. And here's what I noticed the most. Nobody took action on any of it until it became a problem. The information was there, but it wasn't doing anything. So I rebuilt their entire metric system from scratch. And what we landed on is something that I think every agency, every sales team, and every ops person needs to hear. I call it the 3-tier metric system. Here's what most teams do. They set up a dashboard, set up every single metric that they think they might need someday. And then they essentially just tell the team, like, check this every day, take action on this. It's really hard to do that. And almost nobody does. And if they do, you kind of just like glaze at it. Like no one's really taking real action on it. And that's when the tricky thing that happens is like everything is there, but nothing's too important. But it's still important data, but it's just really hard to take action on it. If you open up your dashboard today and you're seeing like 47 different metrics that you've put together, naturally your brain isn't gonna analyze it. You kind of just, like I said before, you look over it quickly, like you're looking, but you're not really seeing, if that makes sense. And the real cost of this it's not even like the time that you're spending looking at it. It's that the problems don't get caught until they're emergencies. If your bounce rates are creeping up, nobody really notices until a domain gets blacklisted, or one of the like providers you send to just doesn't land in the inbox anymore. If you're running low on leads, like maybe you notice it on a Monday when you check quickly, but like you're not gonna, like you could have caught on to that by Wednesday knowing that you'd be running out by Monday, right? And my biggest conclusion is that the team isn't lazy, it's that the system is broken. Because the typical system most agencies will run is a system where a human has to go find the problems within the campaigns, to remember what like bad looks like for each client, to manually compare numbers in their head to sort of figure out what bad looks like for each client. And in my opinion, that's backwards. Problems should find people, not the other way around. So here's the fix, 3 tiers, and each one has its own job. Tier 1, alert triggers. So these are your stop what you're doing, take care of this type of alerts. Ideally, you automatically get notified when something breaks, and that could be wherever your communication is. Like for most companies, this will be like on Slack, and I think that's a good spot just because it's where you kind of like stay in the loop and like in communication with the team. I don't think it should be a dashboard that kind of has a red alert on it. I do think it should ping you directly. So let's say like bounce rate hits 2%, send a Slack message, but then also create a task within ClickUp, within whatever like project management you use. No positive replies within the last 3 days. That'd be another one where you get a Slack message that this client is struggling, and then as well a task gets created to close the loop of whatever you might have put in place to fix it. And then the third alert that I would use as a bare minimum would be days left ascending to be at least 4 to 7 days. It really just depends on how much volume you're sending and how realistic it is to be planning that far out, and just to have that volume pre-prepped. But ideally, the more volume you have prepared, the easier your life will be as a GTM motion manager, if that makes sense. But sometimes if you had 3 months of volume already prepped, the issue comes when if one of the campaigns isn't performing, you're kind of stuck with that volume. So that's why going too far into the future, especially early in a GTM motion, doesn't make sense. The real key here is that you have key thresholds for each of your clients, and they all trigger at different points for each client. So some clients will have an offer that takes more emails to get a positive reply, and that's okay, but is it within their standards, right? The positive reply with like every single 3 days, if depending on the math that you do, first I would send more volumes so that math makes sense, that you at least get one positive reply every 3 days. But let's say for some reason you're only sending like 30,000 emails per month, and like you had an offer that just took a lot of emails to send, then like you have to adjust that a little bit, right? And then as well, the big one is some unique scenarios you can get away with a little bit more than like a 2% bounce rate and not get affected. But again, it depends on the industry, depends on the types of campaigns you're sending. Every single client should have different thresholds that these alerts trigger off of, but it's the same nature of alerts. The idea with these tier 1 alerts is that 3 things happen automatically. The responsible person gets notified on Slack, ideally. The task gets created with the clear next steps of, for this type of alert or this type of problem, this is what you do next. And then the client's health goes to a red status, which is, I'll dive into this later, but just sort of like a health scoring, like the health score of each client. So ideally there's some type of alert that marks it as this client is in trouble, because these are like the tier 1 fire, take action now, drop everything type of problems. Now, tier 2 metrics, your weekly review metrics. So this is what you look at once a week, as the name implies. These aren't something to look at daily, even though it's kind of tempting. Look at it once a week and make actual decisions once a week, because these are your should we change directions type of metrics. So this is like email sent versus like what's your KPI / objective versus actual, what's your positive replies versus actual, or how many positive replies you actually have to the target, and then how are trends performing week over week, and then what's your positive reply to lead ratio or positive to reply ratio. Same thing, just how many emails it takes to get a positive reply. You could look at it at the reply level, you could look at it at the total level. One metric that you would apply across the board. Like the biggest thing about these tier 2 metrics is that you're looking for patterns. So which clients are like improving results, which ones are declining, what are things that you can replicate for other industries and other clients, and what should we stop right away. And the rhythm's really nice. Like if you do this once a week, you could do this end of week on Fridays to have a fresh week. You could do this first thing Monday to prep for the week. If you do this, ideally you do it before any client calls, so you kind of have a like strategy going into those calls. But then you could even go further and go like, this is like a monthly thing that you run, where you kind of like, you have a strategy on the monthly of like, this is where the direction we want to head, the segments we want to hit, the type of messaging, or potentially a new offer. Then you break it down into weekly objectives. And then you basically, what you're comparing is, are we on track with the monthly vision going into this? Or potentially quarterly vision, depending on how you do your planning. I would recommend monthly, especially at the beginning of a GTM motion. Later, when you kind of have a rhythm, you know what segments you're hitting, you know your numbers better as well, then you can go into quarterly, just because you already have your lead list. Just a quick tangent on this. You already have your lead list. You already know who you'll be targeting. You know how many leads just in total and how much volume you'll need to be sending. And what you're looking for is the same metrics or slightly better, but you have a good pulse on like the results you'll be receiving from those emails. So that's when I'd go quarterly. But in the meantime, I'd go monthly if you're not too sure. And it's like, look, we have 4 weeks, we have 4 segments, let's test 1 segment per week. Or if you want to give it more time, which I recommend, maybe you go 1 segment every 2 weeks, and then that's like a 2-month kind of game plan. And then you decide which segment performs the best. Or another one would be generate all 4 lists up front, and then you break it, like you review each segment at the end of maybe a month, at the end of 2 months, and then that also works. And then you can make decisions early to decide what you're gonna like get rid of. But quick tangent on game planning, but the idea on these weekly metrics, back to the tier 2 stuff, is you have a game plan and you get into those weekly calls with clients, kind of giving them insights of like what's, how things are looking, and just because you're fresh on the data. The biggest thing about tier 2 metrics is that you're not reacting to them. It's really strategic how you review them. You look at this once, like I said at the beginning, try to protect this to only be a once a week type of thing. The reason you don't look at it daily is because it's really easy to sort of make decisions before the data is significant. And hypothetical scenario, just to paint the picture, you're sending for a client, out of nowhere you just get a bad week of almost like a 50% drop in positive replies, or maybe not a bad week, but a bad day, where you're used to maybe getting 6 positive replies per day, and then all of a sudden you only get 2. Does that 2 warrant an entire strategic rebuild? Does that mean inboxes are dead? Does that mean reply rates are dead? It's really easy to panic. But if you waited a week, and this is something you'll notice more and more as you play around with cold email campaigns, is one day you might get 6, one day you'll get 9, and then the next day you'll get 1, and then like it does just jump around. It's really hard to predict, and you're not going to get 6 every single day, even though that might be the average when you look at it weekly. So just wanted to sort of preface that this is why looking at it daily just isn't ideal. And tier 3 metrics are your sort of drill down deep analysis metrics. So everything else, so this is going to like lifetime stats, 90-day stats, individual sequence stats, which you'll want to like actually dive into, analyzing which day of the week sends better, which time of the day sends better, just like really though, and even just like A/B tests, like just variant testing. And that's when you kind of dive into it, and those stats just don't need to be reviewed all the time. And my rule is like, you don't look at these stats until there's something clear in like the tier 1 and tier 2 stats that tells you to. Or as well, like I'll touch on this right after this, but if a client's health goes to yellow, which would just mean like medium, then you also drill into these stats to figure out what's happening. As well, if you need to explain a trend to a client of like, we're noticing that this ICP is performing really well, then you pull up these stats naturally. And as well, for yourself to prove which initiative is performing the best, you have some historical data. On a like daily and weekly level, you're not opening this dashboard often. Maybe once a week, it's just kind of just like a mental check of how are we performing month over month, but you're not always going back into, well, like how do the stats today compare to 90 days ago, compared to lifetime. It's just not often you find yourself needing those stats. And especially if you're seeing these stats on your dashboard, I recommend hiding them as soon as possible, just because you won't take action on them until something goes wrong. The mistake most teams make is putting this data on their main dashboard, so everyone's staring at the 90-day numbers every day, when really this data is only useful, I would argue, every quarter, maybe monthly, just to kind of get a pulse, but not daily. And for most agencies, I would assume that these stats live on their main dashboard. Now, the last piece, which is a little bit of a bonus to this system, but it's the traffic light system, just what I was hinting at before, like when a client goes red, when a client goes yellow. Let's say you're reviewing your entire portfolio of clients. One way that you could do it would be with a percentage, right? So you could have some type of like composite health score where there's weighted averages of like, if their email performance is at X, we'll give them, it's worth like 25% of their grade. And then if their LinkedIn performance is this, and then if their meeting booking rate is this, we'll weigh it at a certain percentage. Like there's a lot of like complicated math you could be doing behind this. Then the tricky thing is, let's say you get back and like a client has, like when you're looking at the dashboard, a client has like a 73% overall health score. Really hard to know what that means, because let's say performance, or like email's not performing at all, LinkedIn's performing well, but you're limited with volume. Really hard to get a good pulse, right? So that's why I would rather use sort of a traffic light system, as simple as possible. Green meaning that all the tier 1 metrics are good within the client's thresholds, and those can be adjusted, right, over time, but it just means no action needed. Client is healthy. Yellow would mean that from the tier 1 metrics, one or more is approaching the threshold. So it's like within 20% of hitting there. So it's just like, keep an eye on this. And then red is the threshold is breached. We're definitely underperforming and we need to take a hold of this. Task gets created, notification goes out, and we need to go fix it now, like a fire situation. So yeah, makes things super simple. 3 colors instantly. When you're like kind of reviewing your clients in your dashboard, right away who's healthy, who's not worth paying more attention to, but you know what I mean? It's like, who do you prioritize to brainstorm a fix? So how do you actually build this? Start with tier 1. Ask yourself what metrics, if they broke, require immediate attention. So for most outbound teams and myself, that means bounce rate, naturally. Days since last positive reply is definitely one. Lead runway below the minimum of just like how many days of sending do we have left. And then if we don't hit the daily sending volume, that's another one that I really like, just to know we have the inbox volume for this. Are we hitting it? If not, what happened? Because it tells you a lot, right? It tells you if there's disconnects in the inboxes. Do we have enough volume? If there's somehow an error in the days or like in the lead runway. So tells you a lot. That's another one I would add. But you set these up depending on what you use, Airtable, or you could have some type of custom setup. But ideally, you're pushing your campaign stats into somewhere, and Airtable is a really good tool for that. And the rule, every time a threshold is breached, trigger an alert in Slack and automatically create a task in whatever project management system you use and assign the responsible person to it right away. Then second would be that like weekly review session. So I'd pick a day, probably Mondays. You pick your weekly metrics that you track. The ones I mentioned before would be really solid. And as well, this is kind of like an adjustment case by case, the type of clients you have, and just like the type of agency you run, or if you're internally at a company and you're like head of the cold outbound system, you won't need as many metrics and you won't need like the client health tracking, but there are metrics that should be reviewed to check the like weekly metrics for the week over week trends and just see like, are we stable, improving, declining, especially on the, like, did we send enough emails? That's the big one. And two, for me, the big one is just email to lead ratio. Did we, ideally we stabilize and we're at like the threshold that we're happy with, but if it gets better, of course, that's good. Like we send less emails and get a positive reply. That's always great. The biggest thing you're trying to avoid is a big spike on these weekly stats, right? So then, maybe you create tasks for yourself if you notice that, but that's the weekly. In a nutshell, I do it on Mondays and schedule it for 30 minutes or like 30 minutes on a Monday, and make sure you don't skip this. It's easy to skip just because like, especially if clients are all in the green, you're not too worried, but if they are in the green, that means it's an easier check. And then finally, take all of those extra stats, everything, lifetime, last 90 days, even last 30 days, I wouldn't put it on your main dashboard, and put it in a separate view. If you're using Airtable, I would use some type of like, you have your main view, like I'd use a gallery view if we're getting technical. When you click in it, then you get your drill down stats. And even that should be like a section within that like side record that opens up. The people who know Airtable will know what I'm talking about, but not a huge build. Super valuable though, and you could probably build it out in a week, probably faster. The hard part is just thinking of the metrics that you would exactly pull. The ones I shared in this video are actual metrics that I use, but there's always sort of nuances for clients and different types of agencies that'll change how you think about it. And the result is that your team is just going to stop going in your dashboards and scroll mindlessly without really knowing what they're looking for. Like they'll check Slack for alerts, they'll get notified, right? So they'll know right away, they'll execute, and then they will move on, and they won't be thinking about like, oh, did I like double check bounce rates for these clients? Did I like, is this campaign bouncing too much? It's hard to stay on top of that type of system. So weekly reviews take 30 minutes instead of all that added up time that you're kind of just clicking through stuff. You know what your most important metrics are, instead of like a big dashboard that kind of shows everything, that might have like a column for the weekly stuff. But ideally you have a unique dashboard for those weekly stats that you're looking at on the same time every single week, right? And then problems get caught if they're fires. You're not just kind of watching the system, it's handling and thinking for you. And with automations, super easy to build this stuff to trigger when a campaign hits this point, run this. When a client hits this threshold, send a notification. Really, really easy to build those. And leadership gets their time back. They're not just managing in Slack all the time. They're not looking at bounce rates of specific like GTMEs who might have clients and saying like, oh, the bounce rate on this is high, what are you going to do? They know this infrastructure is in place to like help handle that, right? And the goal isn't a better dashboard, it's just less time in dashboards and more time doing the actual work, which is at the end of the day what we want. If you can set these up, you just have a much easier system, I promise you. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about your tier 1 metrics. What's that one metric that if it breaks should wake you up? I'm actually curious what you'll say, so drop it in the comments. I'm curious what different teams prioritize. And if this framework clicked for you, I now write a weekly newsletter breaking down GTM ops stuff, just like this video. Anything like frameworks, automations, and stuff that actually moves the pipeline. The link will be in the description. As well, I'll also probably do a deeper video showing exactly like what my tier 1 metrics are, and like what that looks like even in my dashboard, even like the tier 2, tier 3 stuff. And subscribe if you'd like to see that, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.